Okay, in this video we are going to discuss AWS Active Directory, and we are going to see how to set up AWS Active Directory as well. So you could see here, just go to the AWS Management Console, and on the set box here just type directory, and then you're going to see here your Active Directory type. As a matter of fact, we are going to be explaining what each of these type of Active Directory is all about. But before we even begin to set up the AWS Active Directory, some of us might not know or might not have worked with Active Directory domain services or a domain controller. So I will just have to bring up this slide, and we want to quickly run through what an Active Directory domain services is all about. So you find Active Directory Domain Services, ADDS, on any Windows server, and these Windows servers are used to store the database of different objects like user accounts, computer accounts, printers, file shares, security groups, etc. As a matter of fact, I have an Active Directory that I run on my VirtualBox. So I have a Windows Server 2016 running here on my VirtualBox, and I'm going to log into that server to show you an overview of what Active Directory Domain Services is. So if I go to Manage and I go to Add Roles and Features on this server, just work my way to where the roles are. In this server, you're going to see here I have Active Directory Domain Services already installed. And that gives me the features of an Active Directory server on this machine. So if I go to Tools and I go to Active Directory Users and Computers, and this way we're able to create a database of user accounts, computer accounts, group objects, and then security settings and all that. So as a matter of fact, you see that I have computer objects where I have a couple of computers for different departments. ICT computers, I have ICT PC01, so all the members of ICT will have their computers show up here. Same as sales, same as other departments you might have in your own environment. And we also have employees, OU, where you have the accounts of different staffs or employees that belong to different departments. And so it's just an overview, a highlight of what an Active Directory server is used for. So if anybody like a staff comes to work in the morning, let's say Samson, he is supposed to log into his systems, and he's going to be using the account created for him on the Active Directory server. So you could see what he's going to use as username, which is Jude, and also password is also configured for him. And so if he does forget what his password is, the server administrator could log into the server and help him to reset his password. And it's as simple as right-clicking on the account and you see reset password. So that's basically an understanding of what an Active Directory server is. So it's a server that is used to control both your users and your computers in your environment. Now get back to the slide. So as I mentioned earlier, is a database server that stores database of objects like users, computers, printers, file shares, as well as security groups. It's a centralized security management. You can create accounts, and not just create an account, we can also assign permission to that account. So I could create an account, and I will say that this particular account is not allowed to connect to the systems outside the work hours. So maybe I'll define what our work hour is. Maybe it's between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And so some accounts could be configured not to access systems or corporate systems outside of those work hours. So objects are normally organized in trees within the Active Directory, and then trees, a group of trees will also give us a forest. Now let's look at what's one of the examples of what an organization can achieve with an Active Directory Domain Services. So for you to have an Active Directory server, it means you need to set up a domain controller. And so a domain controller requires that you also create a user object, which is a user account, and the password. So a typical example is where you create an account called John, and you have created a password for the John, a password of password, but then in production we want to ensure that our password is very stronger than password. And so if a user of John and a password of password is created on the domain controller in our Active Directory database, it means that this John and his password can be able to connect to any systems that we have on the network, as long as these systems down here have been linked or joined to the domain. And so it's a way of centralizing services, user authentication, etc. In a corporate environment. And that's what an Active Directory domain services is all about. This Active Directory domain services is Microsoft Active Directory. Now, whenever you learn how to set up Active Directory domain services, you're also going to know what is called ADFS, which is Active Directory Federation Services. ADFS is used to provide single sign-on across all your applications, either on-premises applications or the AWS or cloud-based applications. So using what is called SAML. SAML is basically security assertion markup language. So what it is an open source federation standard service that allows an identity provider to authenticate users and then pass that authentication token to another application known as service provider. So that is what SAML is. And so with SAML, what it simply means is that we're able to authenticate, use Active Directory Federation services to create a single sign-on authentication to third-party applications like AWS Management Console, Dropbox, Office 365, etc. So you see, Active Directory is so powerful that it can even authenticate other applications that are not even within your on-prem. So now if we move ahead, we'll see that we have three major types of AWS Directory Service. So if I jump into my AWS Management Console, already I've typed AWS Directory Service in the search and I'm here. So there are three major types, which is AWS Manage Microsoft AD, Simple AD, and then AD Connector. I'll be talking about this much later on. So let's focus on these three types of AD and see what exactly are the advantages and disadvantages. So let's start with AWS Manage Microsoft Active Directory. And the AWS Manage Microsoft AD, you can create your own Active Directory in AWS. Already we know what Active Directory server is all about. And you use this Active Directory domain services that you have created in AWS to manage your users locally. So it means that if you create AWS Manage Microsoft AD, you should be able to use it to authenticate your users that are even locally on the on-prem. It supports multi-factor authentication. So where you enter your username and password, you're expected to get a one-time password, which is a secondary authentication. You can also create a trust relationship between your on-prem AD and AWS AD. So if you look at the diagram here, you have an Active Directory in your company's office, and you also have AWS Manage AD, which you set up in AWS Management Console. And so your users could authenticate either to on-premises AD or to AWS Manage AD. So authentication could occur both sides. And what it simply means is that if your on-premises AD is down, people could still be authenticated and have access to applications courtesy of AWS Manage AD. So now another type of Active Directory service on the AWS is AD Connector, which is Active Directory Connector. This is a directory gateway, more like a proxy server, that is used to redirect user requests to on-premises AD. So users are managed on the on-premises AD. So this is on-premises AD, and you have configured your users and their passwords on the on-premises Active Directory. but then these users are connecting and getting authenticated courtesy of the proxy, which is a Active Directory connector running in AWS. And so whenever anybody wants to access their resources or connect to their systems, they first of all get a request sent to the AWS AD connector, which in turn the AWS AD connector will have to proxy this request to the on-premises AD, and then the on-premises AD does the authentication, and then the result of that authentication is forwarded back to the AWS AD connector, which in turn sends it to the client device. Alright, so the users are managed on the AWS on-premises Active Directory. Now the AWS AD connector is just acting as a proxy between the client device that is making a request or making a connection and the on-premises AD. There is also another type of AWS Directory service, and this one is called Simple Active Directory. This is Active Directory compatible managed directory service on AWS, especially if you are low on budget and you want to have a form of Active Directory server that is used to manage both your users and computers. This simple AD cannot be joined with on-premises AD, so you cannot connect it to your on-premises AD, and it cannot synchronize with your on-premises AD. So the three types of AWS Directory Service, there is AWS Managed AD, can be integrated to on-premises, support multi-factor authentication. There is AD Connector, it does not support multi-factor authentication, acts as a proxy and sends authentication requests to the on-premises AD, and then there is a Simple AD. Now let's take a look at AWS Managed Microsoft AD. Now with AWS Managed Microsoft AD, it supports a couple of integrations. So the AWS Managed Microsoft AD could connect, form a trust relationship with your on-premises Active Directory, and traditional Active Directory applications like SQL Server, SharePoint Server, .NET apps could be integrated to your AWS Managed Microsoft AD. So all of this app could be running on your AWS Windows Server, which is also made a domain controller or is joined to the AWS Managed AD, Active Directory. Now, other applications that can be integrated into your AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory domain services is the RDS, that is the Relational Database Management System for SQL Server, your Amazon Workspace, your Amazon QuickSight, Amazon Connect, Amazon WorkDocs, even AWS Single Sign-On. All of these could be integrated into your AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory domain controller. And then other third-party applications using SAM could also use AWS Single Sign-On to integrate all these applications like Dropbox, G Suite, Slack, GitHub, etc., including your Microsoft Office 365. All of these applications, whether Microsoft-based applications as well as third-party applications, could work well with your AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory. And so that's what we mean, that all of these third-party applications could be integrated to your Active Directory domain services server running in AWS. Now, how do you connect your AWS Active Directory to the on-premise Active Directory? So in this case, I have an Active Directory server on-prem, and I want this server to talk to the AWS Managed Active Directory. So I could, what I need to do is to ensure, where is my slide? I want to ensure that I'm able to set up a direct connect, which is known as DX, or set up a VPN connection to allow the AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory to form a trust relationship with the on-premises Active Directory. Now, either you set up a direct connect or a virtual private network connection between the on-prem and the AWS. Now, there is three kinds of forest trusts that we can set up. Trust is actually a way of allowing the AWS managed Active Directory to access resources in on-premises Active Directory, and also allow a system in the on-premises Active Directory to access a list source, so an application that is running in the AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory. So if you want the devices both sides to be able to access the resources both sides, we need to set up a trust relationship between the two Active Directory. And so this trust could be of three types. We have one-way trust, which is where AWS is configured to trust on-premises. And then we also have another one-way trust where the on-premise is configured to trust AWS. So in that case, any system in the on-premise Active Directory is allowed to access any application running on the AWS managed Active Directory. And then we have two-way trust, which is where the AWS managed Active Directory is trusting the on-prem, and the on-prem is also trusting the AWS managed Active Directory. So we need to take note of this, that forest trust is just a way of allowing a system in one domain to access another resource in the other domain, but that does not in any way mean replication. So what do we mean by replication? Replication occurs if I come here locally in my on-prem Active Directory. I could easily create a user, and the user, let's say the user is Jude, and I give the user a logon name of Jude, and I go and put the password to this user. I could actually have an account that is already Jude. If I password this account and go all the way to finish, I've created it on-prem Active Directory. This same account that I just created will appear automatically in AWS managed Active Directory, and that's what we mean by replication. So everything you have this side will be transferred to the other side. Note that replication cannot occur between AWS managed Active Directory and on-premises. So whatever you create here is managed from this guy, and whatever you create here is managed from this guy, but they trust each other, that if somebody here wants to access something here, this one will allow that user to access that resource. And that's the idea of trust, but that does not mean replication. Now, how do we achieve replication between the on-premises Active Directory and the AWS managed Active Directory? Since there can't be any replication configured between the on-premises AD and the AWS managed AD, how do we now achieve AD where I have everything in this side automatically appear in this side, which means synchronization is occurring? Well, that actually is in the AWS Solution Architects exam. So this solution is way beyond the practitioner level of AWS. So if you are preparing for AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate, you need to know how to configure replication between the on-premises AD and then the AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory. So what we are going to do is this. We already have an on-premises AD, but we want to have it replicate data to the AWS managed Microsoft AD, which is not going to be possible. So what we can do is we'll quickly set up an EC2 instance, a Windows instance in the AWS. So in the AWS, I'm going to install Windows Server 2016 running as a virtual server, and I'm going to log into that server and create, configure Active Directory domain services. I'm going to ensure that the domain name I'm using on this EC2 Windows instance is exactly the same domain name I'm using on the on-premises Active Directory. I'm going to ensure that this EC2 instance, that is also my Active Directory, is having a trust relationship with my AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory. So what it means is this: I'm going to configure AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory in the AWS Management Console. I'm going to create an EC2 instance, which is a Windows server. I'm going to install Active Directory domain services on this Windows server. I'm going to join this Windows server to this domain. I'm going to configure trust between this Windows Server Active Directory and this AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory. And then after that is achieved, I'm now going to set up a replication between this EC2 instance, that is also an Active Directory Domain Services server, and my on-premises Active Directory Domain Services server. Alright, so the replication is occurring between the on-prem and the EC2 instance that is also running Active Directory Domain Services, and we'll make sure that the domain name is same in both Active Directory Domain Services server, and then we'll create a trust between this cloud-based Active Directory and our AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory. And so that's how you can be able to configure replication between the AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory and the on-premises Microsoft Active Directory. Note that for the AWS EC2 instance running Active Directory, to reach this guy, you need to set up a direct connect or DX, or set up a VPN connection so that these two guys should be able to replicate data accordingly. Okay, so that's how we can take care of that and have replication between AWS Managed Active Directory and on-premises Active Directory. Now let's look at other aspects of AWS Directory Service. We've looked at the first one, which is AWS Managed Active Directory. The next one is AD Connector. AD Connector is a directory gateway. It acts as a proxy that redirects directory requests to your on-premises Microsoft Active Directory. So if you set up AWS AD Connector, it simply means that when your users want to connect to their system, the request will hit your AWS in the cloud, and the AD Connector will now send the request to the on-premises AD, which in turn gives us a reply, and then the AD Connector will relay that response to the user or clients that is trying to connect. It doesn't have caching capability. It's only used to manage users solely on-premise. Okay, so it's not like AWS Managed Active Directory, where you can create users both sides and manage users both sides. So this is used solely to manage your on-premises users that are created in your on-premises Active Directory Domain Services server. Communication between the AWS AD Connector and your on-premises Active Directory Domain Services server can be done through a virtual private network VPN or through DX, which is Direct Connect. This type of AD service in AWS does not work with a SQL server. It's not compatible with a relational database management system, and there is no seamless domain join, which means that you cannot join your EC2 instance to this Active Directory. So you can't share directory as well. The last is Simple AD. This is for a low budget small businesses. Simple AD is an inexpensive Active Directory compatible service with the common directory features. It supports joining of EC2 instances. It can manage your users and groups. It does not support multi-factor authentication. It does not support relational database system like SQL Server. AWS Single Sign-On is not supported either. It's for small businesses or 500 users. Can also scale up to 5,000 users as well. It's powered by Samba 4, but it's compatible with Microsoft Active Directory. It's low cost, low scale, basic AD compatible service or light directory services, LDAP, that's a lightweight directory access protocol compatibility. It cannot form any form of trust relationship with the on-premises Active Directory. And so if you look at all of the three, this one also does not support multi-factor authentication. Yeah, so now this probably will be your preferred option, which is the AWS Managed Microsoft AD, because it allows you to form a trust relationship with the on-premises. It can also allow you, if it's well configured, to replicate your data across between the on-premises and the cloud. Okay, so these are just the general overview of the AWS directory services. Just remember them for the exam: simple AD connector, and then AWS managed Active Directory. And so if you come back to the management console, I said I was going to explain this. So these are the major three types of directory services, but this one is newer, and this is Amazon Cognito User Pool. With user pools, you can add user registration and sign in features to your apps. So if you have third-party apps like Dropbox that you are running in the AWS, you could actually use your custom users created in your AWS directory service to connect to those apps instead of using third-party identity like your Facebook account or your Google account, your Gmail account to connect to these third-party apps. You could also use your AWS managed Active Directory users account to access those third-party apps, and that's what Amazon Cognito User Pools allows us to do. With those explanations of AWS and also Active Directory domain services, let's now start to configure this guy. So first off, if you come into the home of AWS, so let me exit this particular window and go to the home page or dashboard of AWS Management Console. So if you want to get to AWS Active Directory, you only need to, instead of going to services and begin to search for it, just go to this search box and type directory. Okay, so it is a quick and easier way to get to this guy. So select the first option that says host and manage Active Directory. Alright, so you're going to see that I'll get back to that windows that you saw earlier. There we go. Alright, so the window is going to open up this way. Actually, I've set up Active Directory before, but then I deleted it so that I'll be able to do a demo again and show you how to set it up. So you click on Setup Directory, and so we'll see those options again. By default, AWS Manage Microsoft AD is selected. You could also do Simple AD. You could also do AD Connector, which acts as a proxy between the client or clients and the on-premises AD. So let's go with it, AWS Manage Microsoft Active Directory, and go to Next. And just like we have explained, there is a standard edition of this AD and there is enterprise, and so the basic difference is the features. Okay, so in standard edition you have 1 gig of storage for directory objects. And what we mean by directory objects, your user accounts, your computer accounts, and all that. And this can take up to 30,000 objects. You are going to be charged $86 per month. And yeah, so what else do we have here? The enterprise edition, we have up to 17 gig of storage for directory objects, and you can store up to 500,000 objects as compared to the 30,000 objects here. And you are going to be paying $288 USD per month. Alright, so let's go for standard edition. Now they are going to give us some graceful period where they allow us to do trial of this AWS managed Active Directory, I think for up to a month without charging us. So that will allow us the privilege of getting to set up this thing and play with it before it's a month's time. Now directory DNS name, you need to put your fully qualified domain name. Just as the on-premises Active Directory server, you also need to have a domain name. So if I show you on my on-premises Active Directory, real quick, let me connect to it. So you can see that my domain name here is training.net. Without a domain name, you cannot create an Active Directory domain services server. So just as I set up my on-premises Active Directory using a domain name of training.net, you're also expected to put a fully qualified domain name here. In this case, training.net is not a well-registered domain, so I'm going to use my registered domain, fibertrain.net, as my fully qualified domain name. And NetBIOS name is going to be fibertrain. Alright, so you can describe what you want to use or what you want to do with this Active Directory. I can say fibertrain limited AWS AD. Okay, so the description just describe what you want to use it for, and then I'm going to set admin password that I'll be using to manage this Active Directory, and I'm going to confirm my admin password as well. Alright, so admin password confirmed and my domain name already inserted. My domain name is fibertrain.net. Without a domain name, you cannot configure this Active Directory. And then we're going to hit on the next button. Alright, so this is our VPC, and if you don't have or you don't like this VPC, which is on 172.31.0.0 network/16, you could create a new one of your choice. And then when you create a new one, you are going to specify the subnet you want to use. Alright, so I'm just going to go with our defaults and then go to next again. And this is just a summary. So the directory service type is Microsoft Active Directory. My DNS is fibertrain.net. My NetBIOS name is fibertrain. And then a description is fibertrain limited AWS Active Directory. And then coming down here, you're going to see that we get a 30-day limited trial, after which you begin to pay $6. It's $6 per month. Alright, so before the 30 days elapses, I would have come here to delete this configuration. So click on create directory. And so we're going to wait for this directory to complete, the creation of the directory to finish. And so we can click on it. Let's look at the status. It's still creating. Alright, today June 26, 2022, can refresh the screen. Still creating. And when it's done creating, then we can go ahead and see how we can join a particular system to this Active Directory. Now, before we can join on-premises system to this Active Directory, we need to set up a DX, which is a direct connect, or a VPN between the on-prem and the cloud, and the AWS to be specific. Okay, so we're still waiting for this guy to finish creating. Alright, so you could see that the AWS directory service has been installed successfully, and you could see that the status of this guy is active. So it's been creating, but then now is fully active. Alright, so what we can do is click on the directory ID here, so we can get to see a whole lot of details. This is Microsoft Active Directory in AWS. We choose standard edition. This is our directory ID. We could go here to edit the description. The DNS is fibertrain.net. NetBIOS name is fibertrain. And we'll scroll down. So you could see networking and security, scale and share, application management and maintenance. So under network and security, you're going to see our virtual private connection, our VPC, and you're going to see our subnets is actually in two availability zones. So US East 1D and US East 1F, and so we have 25.244 and 75.233. So two different availability zones that we have this directory service pushed to. Status is active, and it's created a couple of minutes ago. Alright, so the directory service settings, scroll down to where is my DNS? Alright, so DNS address, this is very important. We need this to join systems to the AWS. So whichever system you are joining to this Active Directory must have the following DNS parameters. So to do a demo here, I want to quickly go to EC2 instance. So I'm going to create an EC2 Windows instance so I could join this Windows to the AWS Active Directory. So I'm hopping over real quick to EC2. Don't want this tutorial to be more than 15 minutes. I'll be very fast. So go to instances, new, and real quick we'll launch instances, and we're going to region, by the way, is North Virginia, and this is going to be a Windows AD, so can name it anything. Alright, so we're going to scroll down. The operating system is going to be, of course, Windows. Any Windows so I see that falls within the free tier will be selected. Alright, so this is free tier, Windows Server 2019. I'm going to select it. I'm going to keep it to T2 micro, confirm changes. Alright, so instance type is on T2 micro. Key pair, let me use one of my existing key pair. Wait, I think I have existing key pair. Alright, so I'm going to use Linux servers. What do I use? Let me use Linux servers, key pair, and scroll the way down. Allow remove desktop from anywhere on the internet, and bam, I think I should go ahead and click on launch instance. Alright, so yeah, launch initiation, and success. Alright, so let's go to instances. Alright, so going to refresh. So you can see our instance. So to the S remains this IP address 18.28.193.32. Status check is instance status stay pending. So just hold on a couple more time unless this guy finishes. Alright, instance state is running, status not yet. Refresh the screen once again, initializing status, and once the status is fully initialized, we are going to instances ID. We are going to download an RDP file and quickly connect to this guy and join it to the domain, and just do one more refresh. So still initializing. So when it's done, we are going to instance ID and are going to connect and RDP clients, and I'm going to quickly download the remote desktop file. So this is taking a little bit of time. Sorry for the delay. Let's check if it's done. Where is it? Status check, initializing, refresh. So finally the status is passed and you can go ahead and connect to this guy. So instances ID, and go to connect, and real quick RDP client, and download the file. Done downloaded, and connect. Alright, so username is administrator and password we don't have. So click on get password, browse key pairs Linux servers. Is it Linux servers open, scroll down and decrypt and copy what the password is. So this is the password, and what do? Where is this guy? The RDP client. So now Windows AD, connect and paste the copied password. Okay, yes, it should be inside the server in the AWS. Alright, so this is the AWS. Why the server comes up, let me go back to AWS directory service. Alright, this is direct connect. This is when we want to connect the AWS to the on-prem, so we'll set up a direct connect. So let's go directory, host and manage Active Directory. Alright, so we're going to pick the DNS that we are given here because we need it to set up the join this EC2 server to AWS Active Directory. So this DNS server 172.31.25.244. So bring up the server and we are going to the TCP/IP settings of the server. So open command prompt on the server, cmd and here we're going to, real quick, let me change the font, make it a bit bigger. And so here we can do ncpa.cpl and then we open Ethernet. So go back to the server and open properties and open Internet Protocol version 4 and come down to use the following DNS. And so what is the DNS we have in the directory? 172.31.25.244. Maybe I could copy this too. So open a notepad, paste 172.31. What changes we need to make on this PC, and we can go ahead now and join it to the domain. Alright, so remember that our domain name is what? fibertrain.net. So if you confirm what the domain name is, our Active Directory in the AWS, the domain name is fibertrain.net. Alright, so that name will be remembered now. So still on the AWS EC2 instance, we want to join this EC2 server to AWS Active Directory. So simply we'll go to right click on this PC and go to properties, and you can see that this is EC2 AMAS, that is the computer name. to show you that this is our EC2 server. Change settings is Windows Server 2019, by the way, that we installed. To the domain, fibertrain.net. We'll click on OK. The name will be our domain name first. Don't put the .net, just fibertrain / the username by default is admin. And while creating the AWS Active Directory, I've created a password for that. Note that this server by default belongs to a workgroup network, and when we are done with this domain join, this is going to change from workgroup to domain. So click on OK. Hopefully we wouldn't get an error message again. Great. So welcome to fibertrain.net domain. So click on OK. We'll click on OK, and then we'll close. We're going to restart the server, and you can see that is now a member of the domain. So wouldn't take time for the server to come up, but again, if we go to our directory service, and host and manage Active Directory, we're going to see the information we used in joining this EC2 Windows Server instance to AWS Active Directory. So if I go to directory ID, and you see here that the domain name we use, fibertrain.net, which is exactly what we used to create it. Alright, and then we also make sure that we change the DNS to this. Okay, so I think that's what we need. So let's get back to that server and see if it has been joined fully. So go to EC2, copy, and get back to this. Alright, so launching this guy again, always connect and paste, get in, yes. And so we're going to confirm that he has been joined to the domain. That's what we want to achieve here. Alright, so just hold on, still trying to launch. Alright, so open File Explorer on this server, and we'll right click this PC once again, and we'll go to Properties. And you can see here now that it's no longer on a workgroup network, but it's on a domain network. So this EC2 instance, which is Windows Server 2019, has been joined to my AWS managed Active Directory. And so what it simply means is that on this server, I could actually open Server Manager. And if the Server Manager window opens, I should be able to go to Manage and add roles and features. So Server Manager wizard is still loading. Manage, add roles and features. Server Manager is collecting inventory data, so we just have to hold on a little more time. And once again, if you go to Manage, add roles and features, and go to Next, and Next, and Next again, you could see that we can come here and set up an Active Directory domain services, and then we are to configure replication between this Active Directory that is running on our EC2 instance server, configure replication between this particular one and the on-prem. Okay, so as I explained earlier when we were going through this slide. But we've set up Active Directory domain services in the AWS, and we have joined our EC2 instance server to this Active Directory, and systems on the on-prem could also be joined to this AD in the cloud if only we have set up a site-to-site VPN between the on-premises and the AWS, or we'll set up a direct connect, which is a DX, between the on-premises and AWS. And that's what will help us to join the on-prem systems to this AWS Active Directory. So if I go to direct DX, so this is direct connect, dedicated network connection to AWS, and it just a gateway to link up the AWS resources to the on-premises Active Directory. Okay, so we are not going to create any connection for now. In this video, in this tutorial, we just want to let us see what exactly is Microsoft Active Directory, what is used for, and then different options that we have when it comes to AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory. And I've gone ahead to set up one of them using our domain name fibertrend.net, and we quickly created an EC2 instance to show you how to link up computers, servers, or endpoints to the Active Directory, so that it helps us to centralize authentication and user management of all staff, employees that we have in our own environment. I hope you benefited from this tutorial, and thank you for tuning in.